everybody who's joined us. We have many helpful, experienced beekeepers. We have fun social activities usually. Hopefully they'll start up shortly. And really our focus in our club is really education and programs to promote sustainable beekeeping. You know, we want beekeepers to buy bees once and for the rest of their beekeeping career not to need to buy bees again. That's not always possible, but that's our goal. A little plug for our committees really quick. We have 14 committees. You can see them up there on the screen. You know, the CCBA has over 400 members, so we're really blessed to have a great membership, and therefore it allows us to do a lot of interesting things. The muscles of the organization really are the clinics. So I think there's 108 of the 400 members currently signed up for a clinic. If you would like to join a clinic, just put it in the chat box, and I will put you on that committee list, and your committee lead will be in contact with you.
I think your doctrine is coming through clinics or committee.
Oh, committee. I'm sorry. Yes. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, you know, committees, clinics, same thing, you know. So 14 committees and committee leads. So again, lots of good stuff going on. And you're going to hear from some of our committee leads tonight on some of the work that they've been working on, including Ed from the new committee, Ray from Citizen Science, Keith from the Advanced Group. So again, please consider volunteering. Really, we need everybody's help. So if you're out there tonight and would like to join a committee, just put that in the chat box.
Okay, so we do have 3 new members.
Awesome.
If you take a look at the chat box, we've got Sandra, Beverly, Lance. Let's see, Beverly's from Avondale, and Sandra, a new member, and Lance, right.
From Lance.
Yeah.
Well, welcome guys. Again, thank you for joining. We've had some, despite social distancing and not having to meet in public, we're violating stuff right there, aren't we? A little bit, social distancing and mask in the picture. I apologize, but most of us had masks on that day. Super busy committees. The Queen Committee is doing the local Queen project. So far, we've made 41 Chester County Survival Local Made a Queen sold to date. And some of you out there have our local Queen stock, and you may owe us data soon. So just as a reminder on that. The Horticulture Committee, led by Jesse, last month sold 1,000 plants. Surely more plants than we've ever sold before. Lauren, who's doing our Education Committee, had 3 video seminars in the past month. Our goal was to have 4 in the whole year, so she's a go-getter, and she's done 3 in the last month, and they are all on the website. So for the members who have not watched those videos or weren't able to attend Randy Oliver's or Maddie Prezell's talks, if you go to the homepage of the website and there's a new little box on the left that says video library, you'll see them all in there. In addition to all the meetings are going to be videotaped and will be in there. Citizen Science, we'll hear from Ray and Heather tonight. We had 200 members complete their 2020 census, and Ray and Heather will be presenting the analysis and their dissemination of the results tonight. The Beginners and Apprentice Group, we have 48 members participating in one of those learning groups. Again, that's Tom and Walt has really done a great job. And the apprentice program is new, so we appreciate everyone's patience as we sort of work out the kinks of that. And Tony, who makes our mead, also runs our apiary, so he's done a terrific job. If you have not been out, that's my background tonight. If you've not been out to the CCBA apiary, it's out on Brandywine Drive and Emberville Road out near Marshalltown. So anybody's welcome to head out there. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful location. There's a couple benches if you want to sit, and there's also that is our mating yard. So if you're looking to after tonight's talk and you're ready to make some splits, and you can drop them off there. So Chris Sim, many of us know Chris. You know, Chris is a great guy. I say, Chris, I need something, and then a day later he's like, here, what do you think of this idea? So you know, I said, Chris, man, we're moving all these with the Queen program. We're moving all these cells all over the place, you know, and we're trying to put them in a
You froze for a second there, George.
Came up with what I'm calling the CCBA transport incubator, not neonatal incubator, but a queen cell incubator. So again, that's now something that the club has, and thanks to Chris for making that. There's a backstory on that, which maybe I'll tell at another meeting. But the flow continues. Obviously, hopefully, May was the month of honey, so hopefully everyone got their supers on in May. I saw some hive scale data, which basically showed that in the last 2 weeks in May, some hives were gaining upwards of 20 pounds of honey a day. So clearly, if you've been following along and preventing swarming and keeping your bees healthy and adding the supers, hopefully all of you had a nice productive May. Beekeeping's local, so the bees at this time of year are probably only foraging about a half a mile. They're probably not going out that far right now from their hives. So again, if your area has less flowers and less trees and flowers flowering right now, you may not have collected quite as much honey. And if you happen to live in a grove of black locust trees, you've done well. We're not done with trees yet. There are, the bees look like tend to be moving down right now from the trees down to the flowers that are blooming. But they're two of the local trees. I'm sure people may recognize some of them. The one on the left is the linden tree. We have some of them for sale through the plant committee, a wonderful, they say minty flavored honey. And the one on the right is the sourwood tree. That's really, I don't know if it produces much honey in this area, but it's really one of the prize honeys down south a little bit in Virginia and North Carolina, the sourwood honey. And I actually bought a sourwood tree way before I was beekeeping because I just love the red foliage that it has in the fall. But now I haven't seen a honeybee on it in 5 years, but the bumblebees seem to like it. So again, my hive is queenless. I've heard this a lot. I want to say that if your hive's queenless now, it probably isn't. We're still seeing swarms being cast from the hives. So I always tell people your hive is not queenless until all the capped brood has emerged plus 1 week. If you want to sort of add a frame of open brood larvae and see if they make a queen cell, that's probably helpful diagnostically to see if your hive's queenless, and it will also probably delay the onset of a laying worker by keeping some brood pheromone around. So, we are selling queens and queen cells, but you'd hate to have a queen or a queen cell be put into a hive that has a virgin in there and just destroyed. So patience.
George, we have some updates on the new members. So Tom Roberts is out of Lincoln University. Lance is from Westchester. And I think I mentioned Beverly is from Avondale, and Mike Emerson from East Fallowfield, and Merle is on and is able
everybody in Merle.
Yeah.
Really quick, the board of directors has been working on the CCBA Constitution amendments. The last time we amended the Constitution was about 3 years ago. We're working on, we've proposed a set of amendments for this year too. We'd like to keep the constitution of the organization as a living document as possible, and when things change, we like to make sure they're reflected in the Constitution. The highlights of the proposed amendments include mainly allowing voting for November's Board of Directors election and other club matters to be remote. In the past, we've always had to be present at a meeting, and now with Corona and also with the use of technology, we would like to expand that to remote voting to allow more people to participate in the process. It also allows the Board of Directors to vote on matters electronically, not needing to be present. We've had a couple meetings this year where we've met remotely and have not been able to vote because it's not in the Constitution. And just a reminder, this is not a change, but how the leadership of the club works. The members vote for the Board of Directors members, which is generally in November. The Board of Directors decides the major officers of the club, and then the president appoints the committee lead. So that's kind of how we decide on the leadership. The board, there was a little bit of talk about changing the makeup of the board of directors, but we've decided as of this year to keep the board of directors to remain at 7 people. You can find the entire proposed changes can be found on the website under the document, Government Documents, Proposed Constitution Amendment 6/2020. We're going to have a vote on the amendments in the September 2020 meeting. And again, hopefully we'll be able to gather for that time. So just as a high, again, nothing too controversial, but again, everyone's welcome to review the amendments so they're ready to vote on them in September. So we're going to officially start our meeting now. We're going to open it up to the Bee Gurus. The Bee Gurus are here to answer questions from our members. So if you start to have some questions about your beekeeping or what's going on, we're going to do that for about 20 minutes or so. Then we're going to move to Ray and his committee to look at the census results. Paul's going to do cowboy beekeeping and what he's doing with his hives right now. Mark's going to briefly review miticides. Ed's going to do summer splits, and Keith's going to do harvesting honey, and all before 9 o'clock, right, guys? So we're going to be moving it tonight, but we have jam-packed, hopefully very useful information, practical information to the beekeeper out there. So we're going to turn it over to the Bee Gurus. So anybody out there who has questions, please type in the question and answer. And we have Merle, we have Paul. Did Keith join, Mark?
He did not.
Okay, so right now we have Merle and Paul answering you guys' questions tonight. And any other panelists that are on, Ray and Ed, will answer questions for a bit. And Paul, would you like to field the questions?
Sure.
Or Mark, do you want to field the questions? Or
I can certainly do that from Howard. There are often queen issues this time of year. If we have a big hive that's now broodless, how can we safely do an OA dribble?
Well, I don't quite understand the question. Typically, this would be an ideal time to do the bio vapor, but one could choose to do the dribble, and I don't see any danger in doing it. You definitely would. I would suggest taking a look at Randy Oliver's scientific beekeeping page, and you're going to find a mixing chart for the dribble, for the OX dribble, and there will be temperature guidelines. That's one thing I would verify.
And in fact, on my presentation here in a few minutes, that will be one of my slides, is the temperature ranges for the various treatments.
Click.
Okay. I could spell. Okay, this next question is, consider a hive that swarmed 4 weeks ago and now had a new laying queen. Is it likely or unlikely that the same hive would swarm again?
Well, probably unlikely, but there are so many variables. I'm going to say if we had a strong flow, if the population built up again, it became, the brood nest was backfilled, anything that would, sort of push it and force it into swarming. But typically, we have one swarming event, and that's it. But again, it's bees. You really just have to keep track of them. Keep looking. If you find swarm cells, and if the population is getting out of hand, and if there's a huge amount of brood, if they're still cranking, come July, they might swarm again.
Especially if you're feeding, Merle, right? So if you continue to feed your colony 1-to-1, and they think they're on a nectar flow and they're brooding up, and you're not keeping up space-wise, they'll swarm.
I'm including nutrition in the one statement, meaning, yeah, feeding or natural.
Mm.
You know, this has been a very strange year. Things were late. I don't know. Some folks might have a strong August. You know, if they're a knotweed,
Mm.
things like that could push them to really. It's very local
Right.
dependent. But yes, certainly the feeding would do it. But um, you know, the real answer is observation, opening, looking, and you can see what the colony is doing. If they're still brooding up heavy, population is high. Those are the signs that you'll get.
Yeah, you can have many after swarms, and it depends upon conditions. So it all depends. But as long as you take care of or address the situation that made the queen swarm, and it's usually just crowding. If you take the sealed brood and move it down to the lower deep and keep the upper deep open with frames for her to lay in, then she should be happy. And put on adequate supers so that they don't have to fill the brood nest with nectar.
Yeah, that's a good point, Paul. And it really, it's just a continuation of the first cycle. The same factors could drive it. Typically, those primary factors, you know, very heavy nectar flow, the natural brooding up or sudden growth spurt of the colony. Normally, in most cases, those two factors have dropped away, but we don't really know, short of looking in the colony, simply observation.
Okay. All right. Given the crazy spring weather we had, can you project, who's got a crystal ball? Can you project what the nectar flow timeline might be?
No.
No. That was going to be my answer. No.
So I think Fred is down in Delaware, right? Or close to Delaware. So
Yeah.
you're probably better off than I am in Downingtown, the epicenter of Chester County. It was cold spring. The honeysuckle bloomed profusely. So I'll bet that most of my honey that I just harvested on June 3rd, most of that is like honeysuckle, very, very sweet and very flavorful, very floral aroma. But the black locust really did not open around the Downingtown or Eagle area until maybe May 24th. It's like 2.5 weeks late. And I think it is disappearing in my locale. Some of the trees that I've seen had been opened for maybe only 2 weeks, and I think they're gone.
Well, my black locusts are finished. They did open late, but I had, I'm going to say, a very good black locust flow. I'm going to say 6 heavy days, lost 1 day to rain. And that's a pretty good score for black locust. But between the tulip poplars and whatnot, it's very interesting. The spring was late. You know, we had the severe cold weather. April and May started out cold, and in my situation, the honey production is right on track for being a very good year. And I think Keith is in the same situation. He's been very pleased. And from what I've heard, other members in the club who are specifically targeting looking at honey production, that they're quite pleased with this year.
You know, and the bees are coming down off the trees right now. So the trees are almost done once the lindens finish up for the most part, and there's some others. But so then it depends on the amount of rain we get this summer. So if we continue to get rain and everything that's sort of down low continues to bloom, the clover, the all the other flowers, the flow will continue just like last year. The dearth is the period where there is no nectar out there for the bees, and the dearth didn't occur last year until September. So it all depends on what the weather does and what's in your location. So, and that's why it's important to study what's going on in your hives and observe what's going on in your hives and observe what's going on in the environment, because what applies to Fred's apiary is different than what applies to somebody who's in northern Chester County.
Absolutely. And clover, if you have a good amount of white clover in the area, and we have reasonable rainfall, that can be a real savior. White clover is sort of my fallback on.
Yeah, so keep your supers on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, George, all I can say is that last year at this point, down boy. Last year at this point, I had 285 pounds of honey from my 4 hives. This year, last week, I just harvested 140. That was my first harvest.
Wow.
There is a lot more in there since June 3rd, but
Right.
I won't harvest till next week.
No, it's great. It's great. Hopefully everyone has the chance to harvest a little bit this year. I was at the beginners group meeting 2 days ago, and the traditional teaching is all you're trying to do is get your bees to survive the winter and not harvest. But you're not going to harm your bees by taking a frame of honey out or 2 frames of honey out and extracting them and then feeding them in the fall. And everyone should enjoy that part of beekeeping, because that's the fun. That's part of the fun part, to collect your own honey. So don't be afraid to harvest this month.
Yeah, something that fits into that, George. I think we did hear that a new colony, a new package, whatever it might be. Sometimes you'll hear the comment, "Well, I'm going to leave all of the honey for the bees."
Right.
That's going to build them up, but it doesn't. The bees use as much honey as they need. If there's extra honey, they don't, have a stronger appetite through the winter. So that extra honey, you want enough, but having extra doesn't help.
Right.
So don't feel guilty taking honey, and also enjoy the bees.
Absolutely. The more you take, the more they will make.
That's absolutely right. So let's see, catalpa trees in mid-bloom.
Catalpa.
Catalpa. Yeah, okay. Mid-bloom from Steve in his area. And then, so that was a comment and a question. We have 3 L. Demarys. So far, they've been a successful failure. Not sure what that means. They keep creating a new queen in the nursery box, halting the brood frame swap. What's the correct process for selecting brood frames to relocate to the nursery box at the top of the super stack?
I'll take this one, and we're going to make it short because we could talk all night, because our club is the king of these Demaree versions of hives. So you're probably moving open brood up to the top box is what you should do, and they're going to create queen cells, because that top box is far enough away from the brood chamber that they're going to make queen cells. So your hive, I would say, has been successful at making new queens, and that's just part of the process of the Demaree, is that you expect them to make new queens when you move the open brood up. And you have to move open brood up because that's what's going to attract the nurse bees. So as you move open brood up to the top of the hive, the nurse bees are going to follow that brood, and that queen chamber is going to be decongested. It's not that simple, and we really should have an L hive, Nat hive, J hive forum at some point where we all get together and just sort of learn from each other about these, because they're fascinating.
Okay. I've seen black ants trying to enter the hive. Is this a problem?
Well, they're part of nature. Now, yes, occasionally you will have ants. One thing to do is if you're, look under your hive stand and determine whether you have your own ant farm going on underneath the colony, because that can happen. You tip the box up, you look under the on the bottom board, and wonderful ant colony. So you want to get rid of all of that. Now, folks do, if the ants are excessive, and I think further south, the fire ants probably will have a hive stand such that they can set the legs, I think, in oil.
Yep.
Like a cup of oil that the legs would sit in.
Hey, Mark, I have an idea.
Yeah.
I see the questions are flowing in, and we're at time to move to the next segment. So how about we plan at the end of the meeting at 9 o'clock or 9:10 to just hold on and continue to answer the questions. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay. So
Yeah,
we're not ignoring all these questions, but we'll come back to them at the end. So if for anybody who wants to stay on, we can continue to answer some questions. And if you want to continue to type in questions during the meeting, continue to type them in, and we'll answer them all at the end.
Just a heads up, I won't be on.
Well, we'll miss you, Merle.
I'm sure you will.
Let me get off. We're gonna. Can everyone see my screen, Mark?
The 2020 census, yes.
Right. Do you see this question and answer thing?
No.
Okay. So we're gonna move to the 2020 census report out by Ray and Heather. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, this was our first undertaking for a CCBA census, and I'd like to thank the 200 members that participated, and I look very much forward to hearing the report out from Ray and Heather tonight.
Thank you, George. The first thing I'd like to do is thank all the Citizen Science Committee members for the multiple design reviews and construction messages that we had back and forth to actually implement the survey. I think one of the critical things was having a good platform. The Club Express platform turned out to be a real good asset to the club. It was easy to implement the survey, and I think that had a lot to do with the number of people responding. I'd like to give special thanks to Heather for the technical support she provided through the survey and analytical phases of the project. And also George for the terrific job advertising, especially all the social media advertisements. I also think that had a lot to do with the success of the census. So we have three subject matters. The first is the club's community, making measurements of the community. The second topic is pests and diseases. And then the last one will be overwintering practices. So just to talk a little bit about the community, the final report has a lot of charts in it. I would recommend for more detail to go into the final report. Because of the time constraints tonight, I'm just going to go through some typical examples. But the good news is the club has a lot of experience, and the experience and knowledge is really the right mix in both novice beekeepers, intermediate, and advanced. The ratios of memberships experience looks terrific. And the next chart addresses the number of colonies managed by beekeepers. So the majority have 1 to 5. About 25% of the members have 6 to 20 colonies. Again, a really good balance of apiary size. and a good representation of large apiaries too, some over 100 colonies. So in addition to wanting to know about the experience and number of colonies, we also wanted to know the density of colonies within each zip code or habitat area, if you will. And the reason for this was to identify hotspots where colonies are most crowded together. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Heather to describe the apiary density geomap.
All right, thanks, Ray. And thank you to Ray. I am one of the novices, just started beekeeping this year, so I appreciate all the help and guidance through this. But yeah, so this is a geomap that we created based on the questions associated with how many colonies individuals had and how many members are in a given area. So the heat map that you see there, which is like the soft green and yellow and red, that's quantity of colonies. And then the cluster counts that you see in the blue and the yellow are essentially the number of members in that particular region. So it gives you kind of a flavor in southeastern PA of where our prime colony locations are and members are located. And back to you, Ray.
Thank you, Heather. Next chart, please.
And Ray, there we go. I'm fighting a little bit.
So the question here is, why are beekeepers motivated to keep bees? And you know, as you can see, most of it is for just the pure enjoyment, helping the environment, producing honey. But I found it interesting that not many beekeepers who responded were focused on nucleus colonies. So they're not really common activities. Next chart, please. So this represents the total number of colonies purchased in 2019. The number of packages, 125, I think it is. Local nukes, 91, etc. The analytics say that 32% of what was purchased last year were non-local bees. And surprisingly, the same number of packages and nukes were purchased. I would have expected that there were more nukes than packages, but that did not turn out true. It's about equal. But if you go through scaling up the number of beekeepers in Chester County total, it looks like about $90,000 is spent on bee stock in last year just to sustain the apiaries in the club. So I thought that was an interesting finding. Next chart, please. So this is a segue into pests and diseases, and we looked at varroa mite monitoring methods. The good news is a lot of people use sticky boards. They have their purpose and use cases. However, it was disappointing to see that not many people were using alcohol washes, which is a best management practice of the Honeybee Health Coalition. And also not many powdered sugar shakes. And you know, these methods are important to your success around mite population control. And that was really emphasized by Randy Oliver's session. For those of you who attended, Randy's model is all driven by alcohol wash and periodic sampling at least 4 times a year. So we also wanted a snapshot of colony losses. So Heather, can you describe this geomap?
Yeah, so what this represents, so in this case, the heat portion of the map represents percentage of colony losses. So essentially, based on the total quantity of a particular member's colonies within their apiary. We essentially normalize that by showing the percentage of those colonies that were lost for the given zip code. So that's what you see in the heat map. And then to put it in a bit more context, the numbers and the cluster counts are associated with the actual colony losses. So it's somewhat important to note that the center point there is largely attributed to one outlier who had over 100 colony losses. So so that particular data point was quite high and definitely an outlier compared to the rest of the losses that we saw across this region.
So this is the last section of the census, last topic we'll talk about tonight, and that's overwintering nucleus colonies. Again, a really big surprise was that not many nucleus colonies are being overwintered by members. The ones that are being overwintered, there's a few, but when you sum up all of the nucleus colonies overwintered and compare that to previous information about the colonies we're purchasing, it begs for a recommendation. And if we could go over the last chart, George, this is the committee's recommendations to the club's leadership to provide additional resources and education to increase the local sustainable bee stock supply. Just as we reviewed the data that indicates that we need to have more nukes, local queens, and importantly, overwintering nukes so that you can recover from colony losses through the bad winters. And then the second burger dot there is to increase education resources around alcohol washes or powdered sugar shakes to monitor mites and to learn how to do that efficiently and have a good understanding of the thresholds and when you should be doing the alcohol washes before treatments as well as after treatments. The numbers are gobbled here, but the second category of recommendations is to collaborate with the Pennsylvania Department of Ag to annually report the number of beekeepers, number of colonies, and number of diseases in the zip codes that the club represents. We may have to go to the Freedom of Information Act to get this information. I know Chris Sim has made a request for his apiary to see surrounding colonies to his sites. But I think it's important for the club to understand where these hotspots are, and we have inspectors that are looking for diseases. In other state beekeeping organizations that I'm a member of, this is done annually by the State Department of Ags. Primarily the chief inspectors give an annual report to the Beekeeping Association. So we'll try to collaborate with them and see if we can share some information. And then the last recommendation is just a discovery of the census. It was surprising to me that the application forms and the profiles in Club Express don't include your number of years of beekeeping and how many colonies you're managing. That number varies, of course, year to year, but it's a good way to understand the knowledge assets of the club and whether or not the total number of colonies is growing or declining, and may be able to take corrective action to make sure that everybody that wants to keep bees sustainable beekeeping practices are in place and we have education around it. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, George.
Thanks, Ray. I'm gonna turn it over to Mark to moderate to see if we have any questions. We're gonna take a few questions for Ray at this point. If anyone has questions about the survey, just to let people know, I have put the complete census results and the recommendations on the CCBA website homepage. They're on the homepage. They're downloadable from there. They'll sit there probably for about a week or so for members to download the reports themselves, and then they'll move over to the documents section of the website. If anybody has interest in the raw data, please let Ray and I know, and we can have a discussion of what questions you're looking to answer, and if that raw data would be helpful. We surely want to share the results and the data with all people who would have interest in them.
Can you go back to the loss heat map? That one there. So the comment from Laura is, can we find out who lost so many colonies in Westchester and find out how to save these colonies? 146 losses in one spot is extremely high and scary for people like me in that area. And that's me too, because I'm in that general area. But I think you said one person lost 100 hives.
Yeah, so there was, as I mentioned, there was one outlier in the data set that I don't recall the total quantities of hives that person had, but it was almost a total loss, and it was identified as 100. So assuming that's accurate, that would certainly be interesting to understand what happened there. Or if that person happened to be on the call, please stand up and let us know. But that's really all the information that at least I have relative to that data point.
Okay.
Yeah, and Heather, we this was an anonymous survey, 100% anonymous, so we have no way to go back and sort of know who responded in what way to the survey.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been as simple as a slip finger and type 2 zeros instead of, lost 10 hives and reported 100.
Correct.
Yes, and we have other data relative to diseases and things like that, which I don't know that they necessarily correlated exactly with that data point. So it could very well have been that.
Yeah. So from Chris, can we get the zip codes overlaid on the heat map? Not tonight, I think is the answer. Certainly the raw data is available, which would be by zip code, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, if folks are interested in the software that was used to generate this data and import it, that might be able to be made available as well from a GeoMap perspective. Just
so people on the call know, the average, I don't have the data in front of me, but I would say that the mean colony loss was about 25% for the people who responded to the survey. It was right about 25% or so. So if you're in around that area, you've done well. If you're up higher than 25%, then it's, then that's who we're trying to, what we want to try to identify and help in some ways. So. From these results were shared with the board of directors, and the board of directors is approving the purchase of 200 mite washes, cups, and screens. So they're going to be purchased, and Justin from the Innovation Committee is going to help us assemble them, and then hopefully by the end of the month they'll be out there for sale at cost. For people to buy some tools to help them monitor their mite levels.
Close to cost, right?
Close to cost.
Yeah.
Right, Mark. Close to cost. Anything else, Mark?
That looks like it. Justin's note is out there for everybody to see on the chat. Either a mistake or a twist. I don't know what TF is, but I assume twisted person being zany.
So at this point, we're going to turn it over
young people.
Yeah, to Paul, and Paul always does the segment that's what is he doing with his bees now. So we'll look forward to hearing what's up in Paul's hives right now.
Thanks, George. Yeah, if I didn't complain enough during the first question and answer about the weather, let me reiterate that the black locust in my area opened about 2 weeks and more than 2 weeks later than last year. And I was really flabbergasted about how much of a difference it made having a cold spring. Like I said, bush honeysuckle was as prolific as I've ever seen it. So that could be quite a component, but bees can be finicky about bush honeysuckle. Uh, Apparently they have long tubes and the bees don't like to get at them, or unless they decide to bite the bottom and suck the nectar out that way. Sometimes they don't utilize that resource. So anyway, I had a slow spring, and I just extracted on June 3rd and got 140 pounds out of my 4 hives. That was my first extraction. This date last year, I had 285 pounds of honey. So yes, a cold spring definitely influenced me. And I thought that the black locust would sustain itself for a longer period of time, but it appears that it's burning out around my area too. So that only lasted a couple of weeks. And the Elaeagnus flow only lasted a couple of weeks. So like Merle said, let's hope for the clover. All right, point 2, swarms. I'll still pay attention to swarming behavior. We still have a couple weeks to go before swarm season would be over. You never can trust them. So I went into my white hive and found 30 queen cells. I could have set up a queen exchange, I think. 30 queen cells. I've never seen 30 queen cells in one of my hives. So they wanted to leave it well staffed. So she's out the door. I don't know where she went. I don't think it was a swarm. But you still have to monitor. And I had been monitoring that hive and had moved the sealed brood down to the lower deep and kept the upper deeps as free as I could, and put a lot of supers, 3 supers on that hive. So, you know, maybe I injured her somewhere along the line, but they made a lot of queen cells, and no doubt there'll be a virgin queen there, but in the near future. I did use the Demaree method to control swarming in my cypress hive, and as I probably talked about last month, she escaped, and I found her up in the top deep and then put her back down in the bottom deep, and then she sulked. And she was only producing 1 frame of brood in a week. And I moved a couple of those frames up, and maybe it was too cold, but then she disappeared again. She got out. I put a plastic queen excluder on to keep her down below, but she escaped the brood box somehow, and I found her up in the top deep again. And this time she was happy. There were eggs and larvae on 8 different frames, in the mid box and in the top deep. So I just left her there. If she's happy, we'll see what happens. So that's cowboy beekeeping with a Demaree. If your queen doesn't like it, let her go. All right. Nukes. So I recently went to the apiary and picked up my 2 nukes that I had there for about a month. As you recall, 1 nuke I made from eggs and larvae. Another nuke I made from queen cells. And the 3rd nuke I made by taking the queen out of my so-called new hive. I went into the new hive and it was crawling with queen cells. I was sure they had swarmed, but when I got down to the bottom deep, there was my queen on frame number 8 on the bottom deep. So I picked the whole frame up, put it in a nuke, and added some empty frames and food, honey and pollen, and just set her off to the side. And they've been happy in there. And she has produced 4 full frames of sealed brood. And I didn't worry about that because my that hive had a virgin queen in it. So I saw at least 1 virgin queen running around in there. So I figured they would self-populate. Anyway, they did not. So I went in there and could find no trace of a virgin queen. I could find no eggs, no larvae, and very little sealed brood. So it had been at least 2 weeks with the virgin queen. So simply, my virgin queen didn't make it back from her mating flight. So what to do? In traditional cowboy beekeeping fashion, I rescued the hive with the old queen by doing a demery, because the hive is huge and there was no space. So I took the whole hive apart, 2 deeps and 4 supers, put a new box on the bottom, took my previous old queen and put her right back into the bottom deep with 5 frames of brood and 5 frames of empties. Cells that had frames that had foundation and were ready to go. And I just put them all in there, all the bees from 2 deeps worth of a nuke into the bottom box, bottom deep, and then put a queen excluder on it. So we'll try to keep her down there. Then I put the other 2 deeps on top of that, and then my 3 supers on top of that. And the question is, even though it was her hive, would the bees recognize her? And I would say probably not. If she'd been out for almost a month, maybe they didn't recognize her scent. But maybe they had a big fight, maybe they didn't. So we'll have to find out in next week if they accepted her. But I was leaving, I'm going away for a week, so I needed to do something with that queen and the hive that didn't have a queen, so I just merged the 2 of them. We'll see how it works out. Talk about the IPM strategy. I have used the green drone comb quite a bit. I have taken, in the 4 hives, I've taken 13 frames of drone brood off this year. So that's a good strategy to keep down the mites. All you have to do is put in the green frame. It's a bit of a challenge to get them to draw comb out of that plastic frame, but if you paint melted wax all over that comb, they will eventually draw it out. And once it's drawn, then it's no problem. Just keep recycling it. When it's full, you take the green comb out, freeze it for at least a day, and then the next time you go into the hive, you can replace it. Just scrape the caps off and they'll clean it right out, utilize the protein on those larvae, and they'll lay new eggs. The queen will lay new eggs in that new drone comb. Finally, just urge you to take honey. Take honey because if you haven't, they're not, as I said, if you take it, they will make it. So keep taking the honey and they will make more. That'll ensure you a successful harvest. I saw a question that we hadn't got to from Robert Troutman. And Robert asked, how can you take honey? Do you have to wait for it to be all sealed before you can take it? Well, I don't. Mostly when I harvest, my frames are only partially sealed with wax. And it's safe to wait until it's 75% capped with wax. That's a rule of thumb. But the bees are supposed to cap the honey when it's 18.6% water, but as I understand it, they're under no obligation to. If the nectar flow is heavy, then they may not get around to capping all that honey. So as I go through the frames, frame by frame, through each super, if one frame feels very heavy in my hands and there's no wax on it, I'll give it a shake test. I'll just shake it sideways and see if any nectar sloshes out. If the nectar sloshes out, then it's just nectar, it's not honey. But if it doesn't slosh out either way, then it's most likely ripened honey. Take it. Now, to be absolutely safe, you really do need a refractometer. So after you take all that honey and then find out it's 20% water, that's not good. So unless you develop an educated hand, and unless those frames feel really, really heavy, you might want to hesitate about taking it all. So it's best to get a refractometer. And but if you don't, if the frame feels really heavy, then you can go ahead and take a chance on that without letting them totally cover it in wax. That's just my impression as a cowboy beekeeper. All right, I'm done.
Thanks, Paul. I love it. I love the enthusiasm, and you can tell Paul knows his bees. You know, Paul's in his hives every week inspecting, and you know he does great job. I want to be one of Paul's bees for sure. I like cowboys, you know. So hopefully everyone's, you know, this time of year you need to be in your hives weekly. I would say, you know, you need to be in there and really appreciate what's going on and learning. And I think Paul inspires us to do that. And he may not make 750 pounds of honey this year, but I'm sure it will be above the average. Any questions for Paul? Mark, you watching? Because I'm not watching the questions.
Yeah, I see that. It says, any suggestions for hives that are loading up honey below the deep? Yeah, in the deep. That's a problem if they backfill the brood space. And one thing you can do is bottom super, take every single box off and put an empty super down below. Then put your deeps back on and your supers on, and perhaps the bees will take the honey down into the bottom super. I've never had to do it, but I've heard that it works, and hopefully that will work for you.
And make sure you set your boxes back and give them a top entrance, right?
Oh, yes.
I'm sure they're doing that, but, you know.
I slide every box back or forward about an inch just to give them access to every level. So I never keep them sealed up in the summer.
But there was a period there in the last week of May where the nectar was coming in so heavy in some locations that pretty much every cell had something in it. Liquid wise, it was that heavy in some areas.
Yeah, it's important to take the deeps too. So if you have sealed deeps, you have to take them. You need the space. Take those sealed deeps, extract the honey, give them empty deeps. So that's when you need frames of drawn comb. Very, very valuable.
Yeah, we're going to hear a little bit about it. I was making up some summer splits, and I was using some of those deeps that had too much nectar in it on the edges of the splits that I was making up. So something else to do with those frames.
Yeah, you have to take the deeps too, in addition to the supers.
So thanks again, Paul. We're gonna which way am I going? We're gonna turn it over to our second vice president now, Mark Metters, who's going to talk a little bit about integrated IPM for mites. As a segue to this, we were out at our beginners meeting 2 days ago out at Jack McMichael's apiary, and part of the beginners group was to do a mite measurement on one of his hives, and we sort of picked a hive that had a little less activity, thinking that, well, maybe that hive is less active because of some sort of disease. It was less active because it swarmed, but anyway, we did an alcohol wash and a sugar roll on that hive on two different samples of bees, but bees from the same area of that hive. And we had 14 mites on the alcohol wash and 9 mites on the sugar shake. So on the sugar roll. So, you know, about depending on the sampling method, anywhere between 3 to 5% mite infestation on that hive. So, you know, we typically say July is mite treatment month, where we start our treatments. But, you know, if you haven't done your mite levels yet, you should consider, because again, probably Mark's going to mention it, but you cannot look at a hive and tell if it has mites. It's just impossible to do unless the hive has got parasitic mite syndrome, and you're about 1 or 2 months too late in doing anything at this point. So, you know, I can't stress it enough, you know, about that, about taking this problem seriously. And anyway, I'm going to not continue to babble. I'm going to turn it over to Mark, because I'm probably taking some of his message tonight.
Not a problem. So I will tell you that I stole this openly, and at the end of the presentation, there are links to several sources. A lot of the slides are from Dr. Underwood and Dr. Lopez Uribe paper that was done for Penn State. So next slide, please. And the reason that some of this stuff looks funky is I did it on a PC, and George uses a fake computer, one of those Apple things. So anyway, mite life cycle comparisons, you bet. You've got the drones that are going to roll in at a certain level. You've got workers that are at a shorter period of time in getting the Varroa reproduction process done. So they do, because the drones are in there longer, the Varroa mites like it more. It also has a lot to do with the amount of space. So the drone cells are larger. So there is something to be said there. And it's already been mentioned, green board. The other thing that you can use if you don't have a green board is you can just drop a medium frame into a deep. They will build out comb on the bottom of that medium, and often that is drone sized comb, and that's where the queen will lay it. So you just haul it out when you've got a bunch of capped drones in there. Take your hive tool and just slice that bottom section off and feed them to the chickens. All right, next slide, please. And so this is really, the discussion tonight was all about miticides, but to get to miticides, I really think that you need to talk about lots of different things. And so this is 3 approaches, or one integrative approach using 3 different techniques, if you will. There's a cultural component using resistant stock, maybe a brood break, small cell combs. So there's a big discussion about it. I'm not going to go into great detail on it. The mechanical and the chemical. So next slide. And so, yes, as I just mentioned, if you've got resistant stock, what's resistant stock in this area? Could it be Russians? Sure. Could it be Carnolians that are from local? Probably more likely than a weak queen that's not used to cold weather, that's been brought up from the south. So getting local tends to be you have a better chance of being resistant. And then through breeding programs like we have at the club, you're breeding up good, strong queens, which develop into good, strong hives. Moving along. The mechanical approaches, as I mentioned, there's the green board, also mite trapping using the screen bottom board there in the middle, and then powdered sugar. Basically, putting powdered sugar is a method that is used. I'm not seeing a lot of that. I'm not seeing a lot of that talked about, but certainly it is a mechanical approach. The bees get the sugar on them. They get, as Randy mentioned a few weeks ago, is when they get the powdered sugar on them, they start really getting energetic, and the mites don't like the heat, and they drop off. And then you can collect those mites on your bottom board. Look at that. True integration. Next slide, please. And then there's chemical approaches, and basically two primary, either a soft chemical or a hard chemical. So the soft chemicals, if you will, those are natural chemicals. So formic acid, oxalic, thymol, and hops. And then the hard chemical would be apivar. And so all of these can be used. And in fact, I try to use multiple methods, because if you try to use just one, then you can also, just like people become, or people that take antibiotics all the time can become, you're basically growing the bugs that are resistant to the antibiotics. So the same thing applies to the apivar. If you constantly use it, you basically are training the mites to go, that's good. I want more of that amitraz. So we don't want to do that. So by using different approaches at different times, that helps spread that methodology out. Next slide. And so this is the other thing that's important about those chemical approaches is when are you going to treat based on temperatures. So you can't use max formic acid over 92 degrees. It becomes ineffective. The same thing with the thiols. Depending on which thymol you use, it could be 95 or 105. So those are really important to know. I know that the Apivar is often used in the winter or in the summertime, and it really doesn't seem to have a treatment temp max or minimum, and that's just based on this one. I believe there is some different. There are some different studies out that find using different levels at different temperatures can be more effective. And then the oxalic is often the go-to for a lot of people. And what I started doing last year, based on a talk here at the club, was I started treating with oxy. I used oxy vaporization, did it, came back 3 days later, looked at the bottom board, had lots of mites, threw them out, put it back in, hit it again. 3 days later, came back, hit it again. I think I did it 4 or 5 times. I didn't look it up today, but did it 4 or 5 times until I had no mite falls. And so what you're doing is you're also treating for a period of time between treatments so that you have time for the brood to hatch out. And then the other component to this is you really shouldn't treat using any method when you have honey supers on if you're planning on using that honey for human consumption. There are some folks that say, oh, you can do it, it's not a problem, but the official recommendation is you pull the supers off before you treat. All right, and my last slide, I think, and there are my sources. So I didn't truly steal. This is not plagiarism. I sourced everything here. Bee Culture, Honey Bee Health Coalition, and then Penn State. And it concludes my formal, and I do see a note here from Steve that says that max can be used with supers on. I believe the chart's incorrect unless that has changed. And I honestly, I've heard that you can, but I've also seen documents that say you shouldn't. So ask 10 beekeepers and get 12 opinions. Comments from the more professional of the bunch here, or the more experienced of the bunch?
I think Randy Oliver said that it was okay to use formic acid with supers.
Yeah, microwave quick strips can be used with supers on.
Okay.
HopGuard's also registered to use with supers on. The problem being that people who use HopGuard have a worse outcome than not using any treatment at all.
So it's a mite attractor.
It seems as though. So, yeah. So that's the one I've used it once before, and I don't think I'll use it again. But I think the instructions are wrong. So.
Yeah.
Every area is different as far as the mite levels and the amount of brood during the season. So be very careful. You go on YouTube and you're gonna see someone up in Canada who says, well, I can just treat once, or I can treat twice, or and be fine, or I don't need to treat at all. And they may be living on an island somewhere with no mites. So you have to. Randy said, which I think is that in temperate areas, which we're in, the average beekeeper is going to have to apply 3 mite treatments onto their hive to control their mites, once in the summer, once in the fall, and once, when it goes broodless. So again, doesn't mean that's what you have to do, but that's, in order not to do that, you better have mite levels that show you don't have to do that. If you don't do anything, if you choose not to measure and not to treat, your hive loss is going to be 80% this winter. So whatever, if you have 10 hives now, and if you choose not to measure your mites and not to treat, you're likely to have 2 hives coming out of spring. If
Yeah.
you measure your mites and you treat appropriately, you're likely to have 8 or 9 hives coming out of spring. You know, that's a difference of 6 or 7 hives. So at you know, 150 or $200 a hive, you're talking about, you know, $1,000 loss to yourself if you ignore your mites. And surely goes up higher than that if you're managing more hives, you know. So I can't stress enough the importance of taking this problem seriously.
So I want to make 2 points. One, or answer a question or throw a question out there. And the second is, when I said that I used the vaporizer, you know, in 3-day cycles or 5-day cycles, whatever works for you, that I consider those 5 treatments one treatment cycle.
Correct.
So don't think that you can go in and do a vaporization and then that counts as one. No, that's 1A. 1B is several days later. 1C is several days later. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, you know, if you're doing vaporization, you want to cover the entire time where the mites could be underneath the cappings, which is, you know, 21 days or so, 25 days, something like that. So you want to treat frequently during that time period to be considered one treatment. You know, one oxalic acid may give you a diagnostic idea of how many mites drop, even though that's not, you know, that's not recommended as a way to track how many mites you have. But it's not therapeutic to do a 1 oxalic acid vaporization and say that you're done.
Right. And then Laurie had a question. Do you know anything about mite gates and where bees can scrape the mites off? No, I don't. I've heard of it vaguely, but I don't have any information on that. And does anyone in CCBA have mite-resistant bees? And do they sell nukes? And Keith said, "I want some."
You know, I'll tell you, no. You know, our Queen program, which just started officially tracking outcomes this year, that's the goal, is maybe one day we can identify those. And I'm sure people are way ahead of us in doing that. But if you have bees and you're doing mite levels, right, and your mite levels are less than 1%, and they continue to be less than 1%, you know, please send me an email before you send Keith an email, and I will be out there to help you breed from that, you know. But you know, that's probably only in about 2 to 5% of the population. I'm sure there's mite-resistant bees, and some bees that are not resistant, but are able to manage their mites more effectively. And I'm sure they're out there in Chester County. It's just a matter. The only way you're going to know if you have them is it's not based on how long they survive. That it's based on mite levels. If you consistently will do monthly mite levels and your mite levels are less than 1%, and you can show that over an extended period of time, then you have something. If you just say, I have these bees that have lived in this hive for 3 years, it doesn't mean anything, unfortunately. It means that, yeah, you have bees that lived in the hive for 3 years, but it does not mean you have mite-resistant bees.
Right.
Lots of reason why those bees may be there for 3 years.
Okay, that's all of the comments so far.
Come on, there's always more mite comments than that.
I'm sure there are in the questions and answers. I'm just looking at the chat.
Got it.
Sorry.
You want to look in the questions and answers briefly?
I'm looking there now.
Moment.
Good grief. We've got 14 tons. Yes, can use Hop Guard with supers on. Can use Max with on. Oh, we're doing a July 15 treatment day.
Yeah. So there's 2 ways to go about addressing your mite problems. One is there's 3 ways to go about addressing your mite problems. Way number 1 is to do nothing, which is unacceptable. Number 2 is to measure your mite levels and then treat based on what your mite levels are. And number 3 is universal treatment, you know, where you say, okay, everybody in this area is going to treat on a certain day, independent of what your mite levels are, to try to bring the county mite levels down. across the board. So not only are you bringing your mite levels down, but everybody within a mile of you is also treating on the same day.
Right.
That's what we have done the last, at least recommended the last 2 years. So for those that want to join us in doing that, more information to shortly follow. Again, right now we're just trying to get everybody. I want everybody to start measuring their mites in June and measuring their mites in July, and let's go out and kill some mites. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay, and then there's another question from Julie. If I need to treat for mites and take the honey supers off, do I have to harvest the honey, or do I just set them somewhere and put them back on after the period of time is expired? So I have huge concerns if you take them off, and you have to put them somewhere where they're protected from critters, mice, from wax moths, from anything, because the bees will be off. So you have to have a place to put them, and you just can't drop them into a shed. I think Randy had a very good photo of, he had a Connex box full of honey supers, and the bees found their way in.
And I know Apivar is 2 weeks. You have to leave your honey supers out for 2 weeks after you remove it. So that's a prolonged period of time. And Apivar is a 6-week treatment. So that's a prolonged time to keep your honey supers up. I'm not an oxalic user, so I'm not sure exactly. And maybe somebody else either on the panelists know how long your honey supers have to be off for when you vaporize. Is it just during the vaporization and you can put them back on?
Okay, we can go through the studies. I mean, we go through this ad nauseum. Oxalic acid is in a lot of our food, so it's not something like a hard chemical. So oxalic acid, the initial tests that they did in England at Sussex University, where they overtreated it. So they used oxalic acid vapor, and they treated and they treated and they treated and they treated. They wanted to see how effective it was and what the treatment cycle should be, and does it contaminate honey. Honey naturally has oxalic acid in it anyway. There was no increase in the oxalic acid in all their testing. It's something that, there's no money to be made out of oxalic acid, because we can just go to the store and buy it. It's relatively cheap. So there's no incentive for somebody to go through the whole rigmarole of making it food safe, much the same as HopGuard or the Mudaway Quick Strips have done. So yeah, no one's going to go in and try get this food grade safe, but it's not like putting Amitraz in your hive. Right? Amitraz that's the Apivar. That's pretty potentially pretty nasty. But if you read the instructions of that, you read all the instructions, it sounds as if you can eat it afterwards. So yeah. So even the harsh ones are probably not that harsh, but we don't want to put any chemicals unnecessarily into our hives. So yeah, it's the problem being with Amitraz is it's so effective. That's Apivar, it's so effective. Yep. So what you do, what a lot of the people are doing, they take the supers off, okay, and you put in a sealed inner cover, and then they vaporize the lower bees. Then what they do is they, after the vaporizing is settled, which is 10 minutes, they re-put the supers on. But there's no authority on how to do it to make it food safe. So basically what it is any oxalic acid is not honey super safe. No one's going to go through that route. But it doesn't get into the honey, and if it does get in the honey, it's not really bad for you. So yeah, we have to say that take your honey supers right off and then treat. But you can keep it in an area and then bring them back.
Yeah, I think you could just take your honey supers off, vaporize, and then put your honey super back on.
Yeah, an overdose of oxalic acid causes, I think, kidney stones. But you've really got to take a lot of it. Rhubarb has a huge amount of oxalic acid in it.
Okay, and then John has a question, does repeated OA vaporizations harm the bees? Does it harm the queen? Well, my experience is no.
Okay, I can answer that as well. There've been a couple of studies made on the oxalic acid. Even one of our members treated with oxalic acid vapor every single day, and amazingly, the bee survived. That was my first thing. Are the bees alive? And yeah, so the correct treatment used to be 5-5. So 5 treatments every 5 days. So you take 5 days and you treat, and then wait another 5 days, treat, wait another 5 days, treat. You do it 5 times. It might be moving on to 4 days again. So, but then 6 times. You want to get the 21 days or the 24 days of the brood as well. Right. The other ways of doing it is you can make it broodless and then do 1 treatment. You know, there's a lot of alternatives. I'm going to do the quick vaporizing, and I'll probably be doing something like a 6-4 treatment. So 6 treatments. And the main benefit of oxalic acid is it costs almost nothing. It's brilliant. It costs almost nothing. So yeah, that's really good. And I wouldn't advise using HopGuard. It's look at the Beanform Partnership, one of the biggest surveys done for beekeepers. And if you use HopGuard, you probably will. It's not that effective. I've used it, and it seemed to. It's like pouring water on the bees.
Just ticks them off.
Yeah, so sometimes people get confused with choice, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 choices or 5 choices of different chemicals, and people want to know, well, which one should I use and when should I do it, you know? And
the answer is yes.
Yeah, and I get that point, you know what I mean? Like, I get it to some extent, but you know, everyone's financial situation is different and their time is different. But, you know, I would say that, you know, most hives, 80% of the hives are going to need a treatment in July or August, and 80% of the hives are going to need a treatment in September. And, you know, we recommend a dribble over winter. So that's 3 treatments, you know, and when we looked at, it's in the census data, those people that treated 3 or more times last year, there was definitely we didn't, you know, do the statistics, but you could just look at that and see that their losses were lower than people that treated less than 3 times last year. So, you know, that's, and maybe our July 15th day should be July 1st this year, you know, because of our warm winter and the amount of brood cycles that we had early on, you know. So, you know, I personally, in my apiary, everything's less than 4 mites per 300 bees on the hives I tested last week. So I was pretty happy with that, that I didn't need to start treating in June. But Jack put mite away on all his hives today. He did universal mite away because he had that one hive that had a 5% infestation. So he just decided that he was going to put mite away on all his hives today out at that apiary that we were at on Tuesday. So you know, your hives are valuable. Your bees want to be healthy. So, you know, don't let mites get you, you know. Don't let the mites get.
Was he using drone treatment?
I don't know if he was pulling drones, honestly, Keith. I don't know if he used. I know he has screen bottom boards on them all out there, but I don't know if he was using drones or not. But I was quite shocked at 5% mite level in basically the first week of June. You know.
Yeah, that sounds like no drone. Because I'm not getting anywhere near.
The Apivar and the dribble, you know, so I know that they were adequately treated going into the winter. So I was when I did it on Tuesday, I was shocked to see how many mites dropped with the alcohol treatment on that hive. I was like, wow, you know. I was like, it's good for the beginners to see, you know, that there's mites in the hives, and that alcohol will also show you how many mites are in the hive. But I would have never thought you'd have a 5% in June.
All right, we're at 8:30.
Yeah, so
George.
I'm going to move on. Thank you. Otherwise, Keith and I will continue to discuss our mite theories and treatments. But kill your mites. Kill your mites. We're going to move on to Ed, who's going to talk a little bit about June is the month to consider making some summer splits. So take it away, Ed, and then we're going to wrap it up with Keith on some honey harvesting tips.
Okay, so the summer splits is really, for all intents and purposes, is a commercial. what we want to do here is to encourage and to remind beekeepers about the value of summer splits. So George, if you can go to the next slide. Splitting is commonly accepted as the preferred method to achieve sustainability or sustainable beekeeping and avoid purchasing bees. And this was the message strong and clear by Megan Melbreth in her, we did a webinar, you'll recall, with Megan. She published 3 articles in the, a series of articles in the Bee Journal, and has been very much promoting trying to achieve sustainable beekeeping, and splitting is the preferred method there. So next slide. So in splitting, there's very few things that I personally can think of that you can get as many advantages out of as in splitting your hives. You can use them to restock dead outs. You can increase use it to increase hives, resource colony during the season. And then if you have any left over, or if you prefer differently, you can sell these splits. And of course, a lot of us would have loved to have a little more help with swarm prevention this year, which splitting is often helps. And of course, it is useful in varroa management. Next slide. So basically, just in quick review, there's 2 fundamental or 2 basic ways of splitting. The first is vertical. Some people would argue that these are more swarm control rather than splitting, but it's Demery and the Snellgrove method. These are often used in the spring, primarily because you can get an advantage of temperature. In a vertical split, you share the heat of the parent hive, and so that is an advantage. Also, it uses less equipment. And then if it doesn't work, you can recombine the hives or the different splits, if you will, because the scent is pretty much the same in that same split. More popular is the horizontal. There's a ton of descriptors for this horizontal, the even, the walkaway, the Doolittle, and it goes on and on. There's even one called the Mississippi split. But fundamentally what it is as beekeepers, as we look at it, I think the important thing, at least for me, is what works for you. Now, I know we have a lot of beekeepers that just love to experiment, and that's great. But if something works and it fits into your program, into your budget, then that's the thing to do. Also, when we're talking splits, as we look forward to the summer splits, you have to think ahead of what you're going to do about a queen. If you're going to ask your split to make their own queen, that's one issue. If you are going to requeen it with a mated queen or a queen cell, then you have to make arrangements, of course, to purchase those queens or queen cells. And incidentally, just for the books, most knowledgeable beekeepers recommend that you requeen rather than allow the hive to make their own, or the colony make their own queen. Go ahead, George. Next slide. So timing. Actually, you can split any time, provided the temperature's high enough. Obviously, you're not going to split in December, but typically, you've got to get the temperature up so that you don't get the chill brood effect. If you're going to grow your own, or ask the hive or colony to grow their own queen, you've got to have available mature drones. And if you're going to requeen, obviously, you've got to have an access to that, and that's usually one of the real problems in the spring is difficult to get mated queens in the spring. So the 2 basic, if you will, windows of splitting are spring, usually in our area from April 1 till about now. And then the summer splits picks up in July and August. It's interesting because both of these are about what bees do in a natural way, and that's also tied often to nectar flow. So timing of splitting, these are the fundamentals. Okay, next slide. Lloyd Harris published an article, and I'm going to read this, and this kind of sums up the justification, if you will, or justification, let's call it that, for summer splits. So after the spring flow, honeybee colonies are at their peak population and contain thousands of bees that are no longer needed. These excess bees can consume colony resources without contributing significantly to the formation of the winter colony, and this is the take-home message, could be used to produce new colonies. So summer splits. Next slide, please. The advantages, warm temperature. You don't have to worry about the chill factor. There should be a lot of drones out there. Much easier to get you're making your own queens, or you can get access to queens more easily. You have large enough populations to make the splits have enough nurse bees. And of course, the whole idea is to perhaps reduce your maintenance. The interesting thing is that the advantages also are, some of them are disadvantages. So the next slide. You got 50,000 bees, you sit there and say, I'm not opening that hive. Okay, and it's hot as can be, and you can't find the queen anyway, particularly if the type of splitting that you plan to do requires that you find the queen of the parent colony. It could be very hard, maybe impossible, with huge populations that we have in July. But the main thing that often in the past has discouraged beekeepers from making summer splits is they are concerned that there will not be enough time to build up winter resources. So let's go to the next slide then. Who should split? With so many advantages, to me, it's a no-brainer. And if you recall earlier in the meeting where Ray and others reported about the survey, it's showing us that, well, first of all, about half of our club are people who have 1 to 5 hives. And most of those people are not making splits or are coming up with any nukes to overwinter. And these, you can see that they don't have necessarily the resources to split if you will, a strong hive, perhaps. They probably have already mortgaged the farm and aren't in the mood to, say, buy another queen or to buy more equipment to make a split, or they just simply don't have the confidence. So one of the things that we need to do as a club, and we will be doing, is to try to help these individuals gain confidence and to encourage them to make splits, not only in the spring, but in the summer as well, and to overwinter them as nukes. So the next slide, please. What to do now? So if you can be encouraged to come up with some summer splits, you're going to have to do a little bit of inventory control, see if you have the proper nukes or whatever you want to put these splits into. You need to either be raising your own queens or need to be finding them. Which is a strong possibility, you could have surviving overwintered nukes that you may not want to use in your own operation and may want to sell. And if you do, then you've got a situation where you need to be certified. And as you go into this, of course, well, it must be at least a couple months away, but it's one of those things that you got to be thinking about in advance. How and where are you going to overwinter these splits? So that's the commercial for tonight on summer splitting. And in the future, we hope to be able to not only present quick commercials such as these, but to have some on-hands demonstrations of the club about splitting. So I think with that, I'll either take the questions now, or if you want to wait till later, it's the same to me.
I think we could take a question or two if they come up, Mark. You know, the beginners, you know, people that are into beekeeping 1 to 3 years, just according to the census, just aren't splitting and overwintering nukes, and you know, that could be a choice based on financials or how many hives that you want. But you know, the cost of a nuke kit that we sell in the spring is $20 or $25. You're probably going to have to put in about $15 of sugar into that hive to get it to wait to overwinter. So you're talking about $35 or $40 to make a split. You know, when you're talking about equipment and feed. You know, and you could take that $40 and next spring, you hopefully will have bees, so you're not buying bees yourself, even if you lose some bees. And then if you want to sell the bees, you're talking about, you know, a sale of about $200 for an overwintered colony. So you've just made $150 off that. So, you know, the forum has been very successful for many of our beekeepers this year on this on the site to sell bees, and you learn too. But, you know, I'm not saying everybody needs to do this, but I'm hoping that we can encourage more people to make a split or two in the next couple weeks. Sorry.
So from Christopher, could you please clarify what you mean by overwintering nukes? It's slightly confusing if you mean overwintering in a nuke or overwinter a colony that was a summer split.
I think, okay, I'm going to see if I can handle this. The notion is to split a strong hive that has excess bees. And my particular method is I put it into a nuke. You could put it into a full-size hive if you want, but I go ahead and put it into a nuke because that's the entity, if you will, that I want to overwinter, hoping I can cut the cost and don't have as much maintenance in a nuke as I would a full-size hive. So I would be moving that into a 5-frame to start with, and then hopefully if we get a fall nectar flow, or I will feed them in the fall and try to bring that up to a 2-story nuke to try to overwinter. Does that help, Chris?
Helps Mark for Ed.
I think that's okay. Yep, thanks from Chris.
Yeah, okay.
So we're gonna turn it over to Keith now. Just as a reminder, if anybody has questions from any of the previous speakers as they sit and listen, we're gonna continue to stay online after 9 o'clock, a few of us, and try to get through the questions. So we're gonna turn it over to Keith now, and we all know Keith makes lots of honey. So I asked Keith, and Keith volunteered to do sort of tips on honey harvesting, which I'm very much looking forward to hearing. So take it away, Keith.
Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead pretty quickly. Okay, so this season that we've had now has been incredibly good. We've had huge honey harvests.
For Bee Talk tomorrow.
Oh yeah, so you know, Friday night Bee Chat, we'll send it out 7 to 9 p.m. It doesn't matter what level you are. It doesn't matter whether or not you know anything or don't know anything. You join. You can ask a question. You can answer a question. Or you can just drink a glass of wine. It's all good.
And Keith, we can see you moving the screen, but we cannot hear you.
So another issue on the picnic. We have not formally canceled the July picnic yet. We're kind of waiting to see what the state recommends for public gatherings in the next couple weeks. If I was betting, I would bet that we probably will not have our picnic in July, but we should make that decision in the next week or two. July is usually a month that we don't have a monthly meeting, and we substitute the picnic. So if we don't have the picnic, we'll be doing a monthly meeting the second Thursday of July, and probably talking a lot more about mites at that time. So we'll have something in July. I'm also wax dipping tomorrow on Saturday. So you probably got that email from Tina. New wax woodenware. So if you want your boxes dipped in a mixture of paraffin and microcrystalline, you can come by and you can drop them off, and you can pick them up at the end of the day. You can hang out and drink some of Tony's wine and mead. He said he's bringing it on Saturday, so a little extra incentive. So the thing I hate most about beekeeping is painting. So I can't wait to get my hives dipped. But everybody is welcome, and usually we do it, and Keith and John McIlvain do it too. But John's being a little bit more cautious on his corona management. So it's only going to be up down south at my place on Saturday. But everybody's welcome to come. What other public address announcements? Anything, Tina?
What time is the dipping?
I think I said 9 o'clock. My goal is to wake up early on Saturday. So we're going to go 9 to 1.
Okay.
And probably, if we have enough to dip, we'll probably be there after 1. So again, if you want to come, you could even come tomorrow and drop off stuff. I tell people if you're dropping off stuff, just make sure you take a black Sharpie and put your initials on the woodenware. So when it comes out of the dipper, we'll know whose is whose.
One thing I wanted to go back when we were discussing the miticides is to keep in mind or remind us that the label is the law. And so the label says you cannot put honey supers on there, then you cannot put honey supers on, and or whatever the label says. And of course, now you're not obligated to go out outside. Well, you have to follow the label, period. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, and I tell people when you get your Mite Away or your Aquivar, read the package insert, read what's in there, because it's very thorough. It has to be very thorough, and it will answer any questions that you have about the proper use. And surely, some people say, well, my treatments didn't work, and my first question is, well, did you read the package insert and make sure you put it in the right spot and put it on the hive the right way and close up the hive or open the hive? It's really critical. So I think Keith's back.
Keith's back.
Yeah. We were on just looking at harvesting your honey. So we're going to go fairly fast through this. And again, you can ask questions later on. Just to give you an idea of the size of the honey harvest, I'm just counting my honey today, and the honey that I've stored, that's physically stored in the in my basement now is 4,400 pounds, and that's not what I've bottled and sold. So when we talk about honey harvest, this has been a phenomenal year. It really has. It's been my fingers are sore. So it's every day I've been harvesting, and it ranges from 100 to 300 pounds per day. So guys, if you haven't been in your hives, go check. There is honey seeping through it. It's really been wonderful. Okay, do we harvest when it's 3/4 capped? Okay, and when I first arrived to the CCBA, I was told emphatically that you only harvest from July 4th onwards. And that's what you do. That's what's always been done. So it's pretty weird. When do you harvest? When humidity is low. What about the statements like leave the fall honey for the bees? Okay. Our later honey harvests have been good, dark honey. So the first one is I harvest even though it hasn't been capped, even though there's no capping. Same as what Paul said. We check the honey. We've got refractometers. Remember, the club has one of those very expensive refractometers. George, who has it now? Because,
I have it.
People are trying to find it, and it's been me all the time, and saying, I don't know who's got it. But please, if George has got it, go to him, get the refractometer, use it. It is a club resource. When I bought mine, a similar one, they were $500, and I think they $340. So it's worthwhile testing your honey. We're going to go into the exact moisture contents that are good. I start harvesting in April. So in April, we have good harvests of purple dead nettle. It doesn't sound very nice, but beautiful little flower. So I start harvesting then, and I get all the beautiful, wonderful honey. So I have tulip tree, I have black locust, I have purple dead nettle, I have apple blossom honey. I harvest all the time. Every week I'm harvesting. So each one, the ones coming out now, we've got a good flow of the honeysuckle, which was amazing. And each honey tastes different. So if you harvest once, you virtually harvesting them all together. So it's some areas had very good black locusts, some not so good. Okay, I need to get on. So this over here, the first thing we're going to look at is extractors. So the extractors, there are two different types of extractors. You get one that is a tangential, that is more the smaller ones. The larger ones are more radial. If you're buying a relatively small one, you probably will be getting one that works on a tangent. Okay, so It spins the honey out, but the problem is that it spins only one side out, but you need to turn it over and to spin the other side out. There's a huge debate of whether you use manual, electric, whether you use this type, tangential, or whether you use radial. So bigger ones, 18 frame, 20 frames, then normally radial and bigger than that. You don't have to turn the frames around, so it's a huge advantage. The problem with a radial is the fact that if you're doing deeps in the radial, the force exerted on the honey that's closest to the hub doesn't come out. So you've got to spin it faster for longer, and that is the problem. So one of the problems here is that I find that I'm using mediums because they extract in a fraction of the time, and I can keep them separate, and it's led me onto more of a medium than previously deep. The tangential ones, you can get more honey out. Okay, so, and I've learned early on that I don't use manual. I'm allergic to manual. At 2 o'clock one morning, many years ago, I said, I'm never ever going to use a manual ever again. So I'm out of manuals. Okay, so this over here, then we go to what is my choice? What would I do? So I apologize for this, but this is a little bit out of the price bracket. But I like the square nature. This is a 3-in-1 extractor and capper. So instead of having a circular extractor, it's a square extractor. So this is actually quite a nice little piece. I'm not going to get it, but yeah, I can. So all of these things that we go through over here, I'll give you what my choice is. Okay, filters and buckets. What would I suggest if you're starting out, this is your first season, you've got a bit of honey, what do you need? There's a load of things that you can get, things like cheesecloth, inline filters, double stainless steel filters, nylon pail filters, honey gates. The honey gate is used to fill the bottles, and you get sets of them. You get a pail holder as well, so you can put this little contraption onto a pail and then put and empty the contents of one pail into the others. So what would I advise on all of these? I basically use these things, again, that inserts that fit into pails. I have about 8 of them that I fill one bucket, and then I fill the next, and the next, and the next. And then I use one of these pail fillers, and I fill what's remaining in the pail into the others. And I try to keep the filter on. To clean the filter, I go to a place called Kiwi's Yogurt. And they've got beautiful plastic spoons that are very soft, and I use those to clean the wax that accumulates inside there. Okay, what is my choice here? Okay, my choice is this over here. I would use a kit like this. If I was starting out, one of the most important things to do is to get this. Okay, so it's a set of 3 filters, whether you want to have a 600, 400, 200 micron filter. I use the coarse filter. All of mine, I would prefer the coarse filter because the speed with which the honey comes out of the extractor, I want it to actually start seeping down. And the vogue now, if I go back a few years, maybe 20, 30 years, the honey had to be absolutely pure. You didn't want impurities on. Now we do want a lot of that, those little bits of wax and so on. So I prefer the coarse strainer that fits on the top. So you can see a set of 3 on the left-hand side. I put the price on this. Okay, so that's with a honey gate. That's a current price. I would get a perch pail as well, and I would get 1 or 2 pails over here. These are wonderful. One of the things I've learned is get the lid. You'll see there's certain types of lids that you can get. Get the beefy lid, get the nice tough one. And the reason for that is I can stack these 3 high, and maybe even 4 high. I'm stacking mine 3 high. So it saves on space when you're storing them. But for a beginner, this is what you want. This is really what you want. So that's, there are a lot of expensive ones like that. Stainless steel one, very, very expensive. But do you really need that? Now, one of the main problems here is uncapping. So once you want to get that honey out of the frame, what tool do you use? What is your choice? And I've been through all of these. My favorite years ago was always the heated knife. I used a heated knife permanently. And the main advantage with a heated knife is the fact that I could clean the frame, the top and the bottom, take those burr comb off. But again, this over here has disadvantages. A heated knife, number one, it costs about $110. Secondly, you tend to put a heat onto your honey. You don't want heat on your honey. And thirdly, you do have wrist problems when you're doing it for loads and loads and loads of honey frames. This is quite good. This is probably the one that I haven't used extensively. I have one of these in my honey room. Both of these, I have all of them in my honey room. Uncapping is something that we want to experiment all the time. This works well. The problem with this, it looks like a paint roller with little spiky things on. It works nicely. These uncapping ones work nicely as well. It's your choice. The problem with this, the pointy little things, is the wax gets caught in there. And I find I spend too much time trying to get the wax out of it. Okay, so it's again, how do you clean the instrument that you're using? My absolute favorite here, and I think I said this last year, much to the shock of everyone. My choice is this one. I even put the price on there, and it is probably the cheapest of all of them. This is absolutely brilliant. I now have two of them, and it's the Dadant one. So if you're looking for one that's really good, and I have uncut £4,500 just with that this season. It's beautiful, and it's got a little groove for your thumb and so on. Later on the season, I have one of these. So the club has one of these. This costs about $400. All you do is you insert the frame into this, and it puts a line into the frame, into the cappings, and that spins out. So I did about, I think about £400 extracting with this last year, and I was amazed how good it is. This is really nice. The problem is you squeeze a bit of the honey, some of it comes out. And one of my reasons for choosing, for my choice for this over here, is the fact that it's inexpensive. Of all the uncapping, I've got a whole range of uncapping. I don't use most of them. This has got short little stainless steel needles on it. They work really, really, really well. And I can clean this really easily. So all I do is I uncap, and then I scrape it onto, actually I scrape it onto my, this one that I'm not currently using. I'll start using this later on in the season. So I scrape it on the end, it falls down into my uncapping box. I made a special wooden box. It looks like a nuke box, but slightly wider. And all the cappings fall into that. And this is actually easy to clean as well. And this is easy to clean. So yeah, this is my choice. Really, really basic choice, but I really like it. And I also like it, every now and again, your brood gets congested. Sometimes you have too much nectar, and they use that horrible dark cappings. This is really good for getting those dark uncappings. We gave a demo of how to use this. Some of the videos you look at do the complete wrong way of how to use these, but I love this. It's really, really nice. And the beauty about it is it's really cheap. Okay, the next thing we do is frames. Now, when I started out here almost 13 years ago in the States, I had a lot of experience before I came here, but my decision was to go everything deeps. One of the main reasons why I've gone for honey in mediums only is the fact that they extract so much better. Medium frames are so much easier to extract. Some of my deeps, I can't get that lower piece off with a radial extractor. The honey seems to battle to come out of this. And also what I like is mediums can be dedicated to honey. So your brood is your deeps, your honey, your dedicated mediums, and they're just honey. They don't have brood in it, they have no medication, no treatments, no apivar, nothing on a medium. A medium is just for honey. Also, deep frames are heavy, difficult to uncap, and believe you me, they're difficult to uncap. And they don't spin well. So one of the years, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I did all of my deep uncapping using the tangent method. So I just swap them around And one of the best things as well, one of the useful hints, I don't think I've got it here, is that plastic frames are very good in the extractor. They don't burst, they don't break out. So shallows are really nice. I love shallows. Shallows are what we used many, many years ago, but they don't hold much honey. So a compromise is mediums, and I think mediums are really, really nice. I'd prefer, this is strange now, I prefer the wooden mediums purely because they fit in my extractor better than plastic mediums. But any wooden frame, I find that pieces come off and it really annoys me. So I would prefer, maybe, I'm going more towards plastic now. So plastic just doesn't break. And plastic, the plastic mediums are, they're good. They're nice. This is the difference, just showing you the different frames and the sizes. The medium is the one over there. So I've got maybe 3 or 4 supers. In fact, I just took a full super of shallows out today. So yeah, it's they're nice and cute, and I quite like them. But the medium is probably more logical over here. So my choice would be a medium frame for honey. Okay, let's get on to practicalities. Now, a lot of this you must remember. So as you harvest honey, your worst enemy is in fact water. So water is the element that will spoil your honey. So all the time, one of the things that we're doing all the time, while we're extracting, we're testing to see what the water content of the honey is. Now, 18.6 is classified as what honey becomes. So if it is 19% or 20% or 21 or 23%, that is not regarded as honey. 18.6. You can bottle it at 18.6. Now, we must look at our area, okay? In our area, we'd like to keep it below 18% water, okay? If you store it, now this is the important thing, if you store it in those pails, and you're storing it for a fairly long time, let's say until we get to around about when it starts crystallizing in October, November, when it gets cooler. The ideal crystallizing temperature is 57 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're storing in there, you have to bring your honey to 17.2% or lower. So don't pale it if it's that. And remember, he has a refractometer. So George has got the one. It's got a little piece over there. You put a bit of honey in there. First, you've got to calibrate it with distilled water. You put a bit of honey in there, press a button, boom, and it says 16.9. My honey's okay. Every pail, I'm testing all the time. Even when it comes into my honey room, I'm testing. I get sometimes I'm bringing it in and it's 23%. Yeah. I put a dehumidifier in, put a couple of fans. Within 2 days, it's on 16.5. Okay, so you can do what the bees. The way the bees do it is they fan. They use a fan. So I've got fans. I think I've got 3 fans in my honey room. And yeah, you might not have a honey room. Remember that a air conditioning system is in fact a dehumidifier. So if you just bring it inside, you've got a very small room, place your supers in the room and put a fan on it, and you'll find the water percentage will go down, down, down. So please harvest your honey. Okay, so CCBA has an expensive refractometer for you to use. Please use it. Remember that if your water content is higher, your honey can ferment. And so if you're keeping it, it will ferment. And if you're selling it, and the customer gets the fermented honey, it's not going to be too wonderful for them. Okay, and also when the honey crystallizes, it releases water. So you'll have fermentation at the top of your jar or at the top of your pail. Now, because a 60-pound pail, that over there, if you don't get your 17.2, it crystallizes, it will spoil the whole batch. So your 60 pounds of honey, hard-earned, beautiful, wonderful honey, that over there is down the drain, and you'll have to contact the mead makers and let them have it. Also remember, if you leave your honey outside, even if it's fully capped, humidity will affect it. You might lose that honey. And what do? I use fans, I use heat, and a dehumidifier. So I've actually got my dehumidifier running now. I've got 7 supers from just this afternoon, and I will extract in 2 days' time. So I'm extracting every day. They stay in the honey room for 2 days, then they extract it. So yeah, so it's just a cycle that I go through. So water. The next one is heat. Now, interestingly enough, the US's biggest commercial beekeeper with over 100,000 hives, Bretted Deer, one of his primary costs is, in fact, heating his honey room. So the ideal temperature to extract honey is between 80 and 96. I will change that to 94. In 96, maybe the wax gets a bit softer, but heat your honey room. So here's one. You could leave honey frames in your car to heat up. And I've just added Tony Dambro. Yeah, I just want to put his name in there because he heard me say you can leave your honey frames in your car to warm up. But you've got to have a thermometer in there. You can't leave it till it gets 190 degrees in your car, and then the wax melts and it lands all over your car, which happened to poor old Tony, but he still blames me for it. Heat also destroys some of the honey's benefits. Okay, so where is these are figures that we put together. So you must not get your honey over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Then you lose the raw part of it, and you can decrystallize honey. It takes quite a while at 104 Fahrenheit. Commercial honey, this is the stuff you buy in the shop, that is heated to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and a number of reasons, not only to facilitate filtering, because they can super filter it, and the reason why they super filter it is that it doesn't crystallize as easily. So 140 Fahrenheit, they heat the honey, these huge vats, they mix them, they heat them, and once they've filtered them, it's less likely to crystallize, and it's less likely to, well, you're destroying a lot of the goodness and flavor and aromas as well. So a lot of the goodness goes as well. So next part over here is, I had to put this in, this is ants. So I've been having a battle with ants, those little black ants coming into my honey room, and ants are attracted to honey. But I'm starting to learn. I try to use natural ant deterrents. I use vinegar, and I use the natural, I think it's boric acid that you, little ant on, you can eat it, but yeah, it's harmful to the ants. They take it back and it kills the whole colony. But it never seems to work. But at least you're trying, and the ants go away. That's what I've done in the past. But if you leave a bit of brood in your honeycomb, so you don't inspect it well, and there's one captured drone cell that's sitting on the bottom corner for some strange, weird reasons, that's what the ants are after. They're after something that you've got, or a bee. If you're in your honey room, you've got a bee that's flown in, it's come off the combs. Take the bees out. The bee dies and falls behind the extractor. The ants are going for that, not your honey. So I found that I can virtually eliminate the ants by being very careful about no brood. We use queen excluders. Well, I use queen excluders, so I don't want brood in my comb. I don't want to use any insecticides anywhere near honey or my bees. I don't want to kill the ants through insecticide. But I can virtually eliminate the ants by keeping all animal matter out. No bees, and definitely no larval stage or capped stages. The latest one that I'm looking at now is looking at the ants, and I have, in a little shed outside, I have an ant's nest. It's little black ants, and I put some, this is full frames of honey that had Apivar treatments last year, and I'd only used in my system. I gradually use it, but I forgot about it. So it's in the shed, and I have no beetles and no wax moth in this prime area for beetles and wax moth. And I'm wondering whether it is the ants are not going ahead and stealing the honey. But I think what they're doing is they're clearing the beetles and rats. I don't know. This is just my pure guess. And yeah. Okay, next one is bees. Okay, so this is, you don't want bees in the honey room, okay, because you do get stung in your honey room. So wherever you have it, you lift up a frame and there's a poor little bee there, and it gets stung on the finger. So it's a common thing in your bee room. So what I've done is I've got a ritual. Before I bring my honey into my house, I go through every frame and make sure there are no bees. I try to get as many bees off in the apiary sites. Get as many off as you can. Don't bring bees into your house or into the honey room. There might be people living in your house that don't like you, and they don't like you especially when you bring bees in. So the other one that I've seen with horrific consequences is never leave honey outside, never extract outside your home, never allow bees to start robbing. I've seen somebody, unfortunately with my bees, in the dearth period, somebody did an extraction with about 500 yards from one of my apiary sites. My bees attacked them. It looked awful, but I eventually had to move some hives from that apiary site because they tried to extract outside in a dearth period. They thought, oh, the bees are quite lovely. Yeah, look, they're eating some honey. Yeah, a short while later, there were 20,000 all over the extractor. They ran away and left it, which was another mistake. And my bees had a wonderful time, but you don't extract outside if there is a potential for robbing. Remember, in your honey room or your house, remember to have an escape hatch for bees. If robbing does start, remember to put a sheet over some of the hives. And what I do now is, in my honey room, I have a little portable vacuum for stray bees. And I take a little PVC tubing and I use duct tape. And so now if there's a bee on the ceiling, I just quickly have the portable vacuum, suck it from the ceiling, boom, and that bee now is sitting in my vacuum. And then I release it later on with all the other bees. So that's a very useful addition. It would be quite nice to show you what our honey rooms look like. My honey room is just purely a laundry. Okay, so this part over here, I would like to like you to look at this and tell me what's wrong with these things. So I quickly went on the internet today and I took some of these out, and the H over there stands for hygiene. Too often what we do is even on the internet, you'll see people sticking their fingers into the honey. Please don't do this. In my honey room, if you come into my honey room, you've got to be wearing one of these little hats, hair net. You've got to be wearing gloves. You've got to be wearing a white apron and special shoes. So it is hygiene. People are going to eat that. Do you want to eat the honey that comes from these folks sticking their dirty fingers into the honey? And this one over here, notice a lot of the Chinese honey is done with brood in it. They extract with the brood in it. And then they hand the brood frames back to the hive without that honey over there. So be very careful that you don't incorporate brood. Maybe it's good for you, but it's not too appealing. A lot of the videos I've watched are people take their finger and they swipe a spill of honey off an extractor and lick it and carry on extracting. That is no, you don't. It's pure common sense. If somebody's preparing a salad for you and they lick it, would you be too keen to eat that? So please be very cautious about just your hygiene over here. So hygiene over here, wear gloves. You can see somebody, and I'm sure they're licking that off. I wear an apron or a white jacket. I wear shoes for my honey room. I wear a hairnet, or I've actually got something a little bit better than a hairnet. And you wash your hands often. So I've got a ritual. I put my honey in, I come back, I wash my hands, I wash a cloth, I wash the floor while the extractor starts up. Then I start uncapping the next batch. I wash my hands, wash the floor, wash all the surfaces. So every set, the floor especially, gets washed, and those little wax spots, they come out. What gets the wax spots off, and this is from Merle, is one of those steam cleaners. So I take a steam cleaner when I want to make it look really good. The steam really gets rid of that wax that gets embedded in the floor. Wash floor and surface with water, and do it often. And don't use detergent. So I use no detergent. For the honey hygiene area, you need to have hot and cold running water, and don't lick your fingers when handling the honey. So please don't do that. It's very tempting, I know, but I have a special honey spoon and honey taster that I use, and I cycle through those. So every batch of honey, I actually taste it and then wash the spoon, and then that gets incorporated again with the next piece. Okay, so hygiene. Next thing, just very quickly, I've got a PDF. I made this into a PDF, so we can put this on the, all this information can go on the website. You need to be registered and inspected to sell a bottle of your own honey. Those of you who are registered would have noticed that Suzanne Pyle has sent us all an email that, that we need to do a virtual inspection with photographs. So also remember to register your APRI site, and here is Suzanne Pyle, and she can be contacted at this, this email. So yeah, so please do that. And again, my favorite photograph here is Crazy People Farmers, and we have beekeepers, and that is the end. So that was very quick. We could have gone into a lot more detail with that, but yeah, any questions?
Okay, thanks, Keith. We're gonna take a few questions for Keith, and then we will with Mark's help, we'll kind of go through the back questions and get them answered. So, Mark, any questions specifically?
The ants you were talking about were the small black ants.
The small black ants, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Generally don't trouble us at all.
All right, and a comment from Daryl. I use popsicle sticks for tasting and dispose each one after tasting. That works, and so do toothpicks, by the way, because you may not want a huge amount.
Make sure that your honey tastes good. So, and there's one. If hives on a fruit tree orchard, does spraying the trees after just after the trees have bloomed, does it hurt the bees? You have to go through a certain protocol when you're using fruit trees. Number one, make sure that you only spray when the bees have all gone. That is towards either early morning, very early morning, or late in the evening. Secondly, make sure all blooming plants underneath the fruit trees have been mowed. So before you spray, mow all the potential flowers underneath the fruit trees. And thirdly, make sure there's no wind. So if wind is blowing towards your hives, you're obviously not going to spray your fruit trees. So those are the three things you must adhere to. And a lot of the pesticides that they're using on fruit trees are, well, they say they're honey safe, but please take precautions with that. We don't want to kill our hives. I've noticed there's a little bit of one of my apiary sites, I see pesticide kill outside. Not radical, but I know some of us have been seeing it, so we need to just keep our eyes open. People are spraying their lawns when the clover is blooming. So any other questions? Okay, here we are. Steve has asked, do you remove the entire super, or do you review each frame in the super? Do you consolidate your harvestable frames in another super box or store them in a container? You can put a cover on to minimize bees robbing the frames. Okay, number one, I do each frame individually. Okay, that's why my hands are sore. I shake the bees off and then brush the remaining 2 or 3 bees off. They will go, so I don't remove the entire super. If there are frames that are not ready, that they light, they do not get included. So they are put into another box, okay? Then I put an escape board on top of that one. You don't really need that escape board on top of it. At the moment, you don't need it. But if we look at 3-4 weeks' time, in the future, we will notice that the bees, if I put them in a frame holder, now this is the thing, we need to demonstrate what we do. Now, I do this a lot, so we've virtually streamlined what we do. What I do is I put a super behind the hive, okay, and I elevate it, the certain thing, elevated. So I take a frame of honey out, I shake it, brush, and straight into the box that's at the same height. Okay, and then I put another one. This time the box is open. It's just a super. It's open front and back. The bees are not robbing now, so I can get through a super, and then I take that and place it into my car. Then I go into the next hive and I take what's available. I fill in some, and some of the. So I take almost everything every week, and some of them are just filling up every week. Okay, if you don't cover your talk, what do you prefer use to get bees out of the super? So bee excluders don't work well when bees like to go to the top entrance. You have a way to improve the exclusion. So basically what I do is I shake every frame out. So you just go frame, 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 frame. You shake the bees off, brush the remaining 2-3 bees, place it in. But you can use a bee escape. The old-fashioned ones are the porter bee escapes. They didn't work very well, but now they've got improved ones. So the improved porter bee escapes. And, they work quite well. Remember, they work a lot better when there's a honey flow on. So where can I see a video of the correct way to use? I should have got a little video. There's my frame. This is my capping scratcher. You can't see my hand. There, go like that. So you just scratch the cappings off. And okay, just another thing on the cappings. You'll notice there are 3 different types of cappings. I class my cappings as spring cappings. Spring cappings, everything works wonderfully. It's really nice. Spring cappings. Then I have brood cappings. Now, if your frames are near brood, often what they do is they use the recycled cappings from the brood, and it's darker in color, and they're hard. And then you get the third one, which is the latest season cappings, and they are harder, and they have more bee traffic, more stain on them, and you'll find that your uncapping is not that easy. So this is why I suggest please start your honey early. Start extracting early. It's easy. The bees are not robbing. They're not taking everything back. And so they're not as aggressive. They're getting so much nectar anyway. So stealing honey from them is really easy. But you steal honey from these little evil beasts a little bit later, and they're going to come back and sting you on your butt. So yeah. Any other questions? When you're testing for water content, do you extract a frame and test? Do you take a sample from a certain area of the frame, where and how? So Chris, with this one over here, when I'm extracting, I can take a frame of honey that is, if I shake it, most of it comes out. I can take it in the most liquid form, and within 2 days, I know that I've got it. My maximum nectar is, water content I've had this year is 17.3. So that's the highest I've had for a pail. Now, if you have a pail, I can keep that pail and drop it to 16.9 overnight by just putting a gauze screen over the top and putting a fan on it in my honey room. And the water seems to rise to the top, okay, and it gets evaporated from the top. I used to shake it around and swirl it to make sure it goes down, but it's much easier. One of my latest little things, okay, in my honey room, I stack my supers. So when I stack my supers, I put my super down on two 2x4s, okay? Then I stack it, the next super, the other way around. So there's a little gap, and then I put it the original way, then the other way around. And I build a stack of supers. Then I put a fan at the bottom, and it blows air through it. Okay, so that's what I've used for a few years now. And at the beginning of the year, I said, okay, I've got a better idea. And I took a little, you go to Harbor Freight and you get these little dollies. So I cut a dolly, a moving dolly, little wheel thing, put it down, same as a hive. I put a tray, or what they call a drip tray, just a wooden tray. It's like an inner cover without the hole. I put that on top of the little wheel dolly. Then what I did is I stack my, I put two 2x4s on the bottom. So it forms a place where the air can go in. I stack up to 14 supers up, no gaps. And then I put an extractor fan on the top. So right on the top of this, I put an extractor fan. So I can move this whole lot around my honey room as I want, and I put the extractor fan that sits inside a shallow, and it sucks the air, it blows the air out, but it sucks it all the way from down below. So the air is dry air from the dehumidifier goes all the way up the stack, and it blows it out, and then I blow it out, and I've even got a drying rack that I use. And yeah, so that's my latest. I want to create another one so I can have one, and then one for one day that I extract, and then one on the other day that I extract. Okay, so Walt, how's Walt? You extract every week? No, I extract every day. Okay, so I'm extracting every day. Do you clean the extractor after each extracting session? No, because I'm doing it every day. But what you could do is you could put a bag over it. If you're not extracting, if you're doing once a week, you can put a nice bag over it and just keep it there and let it slowly, the honey drip out into a container. And yeah, it takes a while to get the honey out of the extractor. So while it's dripping out, and the other important thing, when you're dealing with extractors, one of the things is to put your extractors onto, and this is from you, Walt, you put on those little wheels. Okay, so again, I used one of those dollies from Harbor Freight, the furniture moving dollies, and I put it under a piece of plywood, and when the extractor moves, the wheels just jiggle, they move. In the past, we used to have something called a extractor waltz or extractor dance. As you try to, the unbalanced extractor, as you try to hold it, it dances you around the room and forces you into uncomfortable positions, and used to bolt them down onto the ground, and they used to rip things out. By putting those wheels on, and I tie mine on with surgical tubing onto the corners, so mine just jiggles a little bit, even if it's fairly unbalanced. You get on to the next piece over here is, sorry to go on about this, but when you're loading your extractor, be careful about your unbalanced extractor. It's one of the most common pieces is having unbalanced, and you're looking at things like pollen in your frames. So when you're loading your extractor, weigh the extractor and weigh each frame. So I mentally weigh the frame, and I've got positions on my extractor where I put heavy frames. I've got positions on the extractor where I put light frames, and I gradually position them where I want to position them. So yeah, so when you're running it, it's balanced. So, and also remember that if you have pollen in your honey, which is quite common, you'll have pollen in your honey frames. Try to put two pollen ones opposite each other, because the honey will extract, the pollen remains there. So you, at the end of the extract, you want two heavy frames opposite each other so it balances them out. And okay, any other questions?
George, did you want to, again, give your bee chat?
Yeah, I think we're going to wrap up the meeting tonight. I said I would take questions, but I'm going to encourage people that didn't get their questions answered tonight to join Bee Chat tomorrow night from 7 to 9, and we'll carry on at that point. I do apologize that there's some unanswered questions out there, but I need to get my sleep. So I'm gonna thank all the presenters tonight for some really helpful practical information on what we should be doing this month of June, and hopefully we'll see you soon. And again, all the people
I have captured the
live, you know, I really appreciate you joining us. You know, we have one of the best bee clubs in the country, and you know, if you're interested in learning more, you can surely send us an email or consider joining the club. So again, thank you everyone who joined us on Facebook Live tonight.